Good morning. Ayin Beis, we're in the summarizing conclusion, reviewing and summarizing the conclusion of Ayin Beis. We're on page 1384.
'74.
1374. 1374. Okay. And we're learning about Torah. Torah, the Torah that illuminates, that gives us directive, guidance. And we learned about Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud. In a progressive way, Mikra is the most Gilui Elokus, but the least Bislapshus in Kalim, because it's like an Atzmi, therefore it expresses itself Dafkan Asiya in the narrative form. Now, just the facts, the action of mitzvahs, no details, no explanations. Mishnah is Chagas, that's Chabad, manifesting Asiya. Mishnah Chagas, manifesting Yetzirah, with is the Gili, the Taimei halachas, and the details that are passed on generation by generation. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh compiled it, what we call Mishnah. Talmud is the process of trying to understand what it says in the Mishnah, being that the Mishnah is written briefly and concisely, and some things dvarim stumim, some things are not are concealed or covered up or not totally clear, as well as not knowing always what the halacha is, because it could be a das yochid, an individual, as we learned. So the Talmud is the process of the Amoraim, the students of the Tanoim, that are mafalpul. They debate and argue and discuss and elaborate upon, trying to understand. But he said the pirush and bir of the Mishnah, and come away with many more details, many more halachas. That is primarily comes b'koyach atzmon, b'koyach chachmasa, through their effort, through their intelligence, using obviously the methodologies that were given to them. Since we're already mentioning, Braisa is a subset in Mishnah, a later generation of Tanoim, where because the beginnings of Golus needs more elaboration and details. But Braisa itself, like we learned, is the Braisas that Rab Chanina and Rabbi Ishaya are the ones that verified, so to speak. They're the ones that still have that Kabbalah Ishma Pi'ish. Whereas other Braisas, the ones that don't have that verification, don't have that. And for sure, the Amoraim and Talmud on it. To explain that, Ubir Inyan, we began the new paragraph on page 1374. Start, what is Torah? Torah is emes, clarity, that comes from Chochma Brura Be'etzem. So total clarity provides you total emes. If you don't have total clarity, you're not going to have the absolute truth. And what is that? That's Chochma Law of Avaya, like you said. Earlier we said the expression is Chochma Law radiating into Chochma Tata, that's Mishnah. But Torah itself, Torah Semes, is this Chochma Law. She'ein bei netiyah liyaminu smail. This point, it's higher than his chalkus, like he says. Not yet defined in any type of inclination of right or wrong, chesed, gvura. It's a kavi yashar. Yesharim darkei Hashem. That's why Sefer Bereishis is called Sefer HaYashar, because Sefer Bereishis is what he calls a sheiresh shemakar HaTorah. L'maylam is chalkus kavim adayim. The other four books that have mitzvahs, so there you already have kavim, like we said, mitzvah sesa, mitzvah sleisa. There's structure. In Bereishis, ein bei mitzvah sadayin, l'maylam is chalkus. So in Torah itself, there are levels. This is in Mikra itself, in Torah Shabbat itself, there are these levels. Ha'inyan hu, so he explained, Torah is kavim tzoi, that in the kavim, it's l'maylam mikavim, because it's l'maylam is chalkus, that's why it joins them together. So Torah is a level that's higher than kavim, but it also, as it comes down to kavim, it's the middle path that unites and interconnects the others. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that the four Sfarim, meaning Shmois, Vayikra, Bamid, V'dorim, are just kavim. He says, "Hem bechinis kavim, Shem bechinis yichud v'skalas adei kavim tzoi." And the same thing, Sefer Bereshis is not completely beyond. Sefer Bereshis also has a story of the Ovis. The Ovis are the Kavim, Chesed, Gvura, Teferes. The difference, he says, is in Sefer Bereshis, it's like the Yichud in the Maitzil, in the Emanator. Sheirish Atzilus, the Dalet Sfarim is the Yichud in Atzilus. That's the distinction he makes. Yeah. That's where we stopped. So now we'll continue reading from there, from close to the bottom of, like we're talking here, 6 lines from the bottom of page 1374. To continue explaining, and keep in mind the key thing here, that interface, Torah providing us emes, but that emes has to be integrated and internalized into existence. And that's what we're going to be talking about. How Chochma comes down into Chochma Tata, into Binah, and creates this clarity that we're looking for clarity in a world of no clarity, to put it in very simple terms. Before we spoke about the interface of Leishanisi, immutability coming into a mutable, into a changing world. As you'll see, the common themes are always the joining together of the divine that is beyond Ischalkus, beyond structure, beyond change, beyond integrating it into existence, which is essentially what Dira B'Tachtenim is. Making a home for Dira Lo Yizbarach, for that divine God, the all-encompassing and all unified and all omnipresent God of Hashem Echad, into a universe of diversity and details and all that comes with that, as we shall learn, and we have learned, and including illuminating the darkness of the animal soul and existence in general. So that's the overall theme. But the details is what we're learning right now of how Torah works. And this will bring us back to Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, and as we'll see, the 3 levels of Er Makabel all the way to Er Ariyah, and we'll elaborate as we go. So now he continues. Pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So remember, we said emes. So far, we said Torah is emes, called Yashar, like Sefer Bereshis, higher than Ischalkus, but it does come into Kavim Tzoy. In the Kavim, it's the Kavim Tzoy that joins the others. So he says that's why it's also Yaakov, which is the third of the third of us, is Midas Emes. Kumeshikosav Titan Emes Liakov. Ubi Yaakov Ksiva Yaakov Ish Tom, Sheyatom ve'emes. So these are proofs in Psukim. Titan Emes Liakov. That means emes, even though all the others obviously had emes, but particularly the midah of emes is uniquely dominant by Yaakov. And by Yaakov it says, Yaakov Ishtam. Ishtam is sometimes translated as a simple person. It's not really seamless, pure, innocent. Tom the emes. Here he translates it as Tom the emes. Remember, it's the contrast to Esav. Esav was the Ish Melchama, Yedid Tzayid, the warrior, the hunter. Yaakov is Ishtam Yeshav Ahalim. But Ishtam, Tom, Tmimus, is this element of emes, truth. For who? Lies Kelo Kol HaKavim. Because Yaakov encompassed all the kavim, all the pathways, all the channels. Chesed and Gvura. Shezeo Amitis emes. That's the truth of emes. That's what emes is. It encompasses everything. The Sharshay and its root is Mebchinas Chochma Shenikra emes. And its root is Chochma, like he started at the beginning of the paragraph, Chochma Detera, Chochma Bruda, which is called emes. Because the Chochma radiates the truth of, remember, from the superconscious Keser, Chochma Ma'ayin Timotze. So from there it goes into Chochma. So Chochma, that Nekuda, the kernel of Chochma, captures the resonating truth of a higher truth. Remember, we spoke many times that intelligence, especially when you learn intelligence, as Chassidus explains it, is not just intellectual experience. It's experiencing a higher truth. And Chochma, that's most clear. As we're going to soon learn, Binah, where it starts elaborating on the details, you can lose that Nekuda at times. So that's where you constantly need the reality check of connecting Chochma and Binah, as we shall discuss soon. But Chochma is that kernel of emes. Let me just say one more thing about emes. Amitis emes is kol HaKavim. The Yerushalmi says that emes is made up of 3 letters. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Taf, and Mem is the 11th letter, exactly in the middle. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So the first, the last, 22nd, and the 11th letter is Emes. And the Yerushalmi explains why. Because Emes means it's true throughout, from the beginning through the middle through to the end. Just to use a scientific rule, if you want to prove a scientific theory, you have to create experiments under all conditions. Someone will say, well, I experimented something and came away with these and these results. So the question will be, what was the temperature like? Was it in a cold room? Was it a warm room? Was it average? So you'll see only good scientific experiments is going to experiment in all conditions and all circumstances. So you could say that there's no exceptions. So MS really means it's MS in all circumstances. If someone says something is true, but that big but with a conditional truth, we all know how true that is. It doesn't mean there's no truth at all in it, but conditional truth means if it's not true everywhere, it's not true anywhere. So real MS is really throughout, true MS. Now you have sfas MS, you have things that are half true, you have true but you can qualify. It's true under these and these circumstances. But amitis MS, like he says, is kel kol hakavim. It's true in Chesed and Gvura and in Tiferes and in all places. That's what's true. The Ralbag writes, "Emes maskim atzmei mekol tzad." As Emes ratifies itself, confirms itself from every angle. Wherever you look at it, truth. Just for interest purposes, you may be interested. By contrast, what's the word for lies in Hebrew? Sheker. Look at sheker. What are the letters of sheker? The last 3 letters, the last 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Kuf, Reish, and Shin. In the opposite order. Or not the opposite, in a different order. Why? Because it says sheker ein le'reglayim. Sheker doesn't have any feet to stand on. So that's why lies always congregate near each other. Every lie will always need another lie to cover up for it. That's why we say, be careful when you lie, because you're going to need to lie another time to cover up on the first lie. When it comes to MS, you just tell the truth. You don't have to find another truth to verify this truth. With sheker, ein le'reglayim. So that's why the 3 letters are not spread out. They need to hang out with each other. Basically, lies congregate with each other. MS, no problem. Aleph is here, the mem is in the middle. So, because MS, we're called sad. Whatever angle you look at it, it's true. And it doesn't have any conditions in that sense. True MS. Now we know Chassidus talks about MS lamite. There's MS, there's sfas MS. I'm not going to go now. That's not so relevant to our discussion here. Point is, Teres MS. He started the paragraph, Teira nikra MS. Teres MS. Ein MS ala Teira. Chochma the Teira. Chochma clarity. That's truth. And now today in our world with the media, what they call fake media, and we don't even know what's true anymore. I mentioned the other day my grandfather's line that even the date on a newspaper is false because it was printed the night before. So we don't know what truth is. And today I don't think you need any proof. Just listen to any media. You can't know what every narrative, opposite narratives. You think you're living on 2 different worlds. So to know what truth is, sometimes the only way to appreciate it is by seeing lies. You see so much deception and so much falsity, it starts to start appreciating where can I find real truth. So obviously in our conversation here, in our discussion, it's all about bringing the truth of God, a singular truth, into a world of diversity that we're discussing here. So I just wanted to add a little more about what emes is and why, what he calls it. It says it's kol hakavim, amitis emes. And what is its root is Chochma, because Chochma has that total resonating clarity of the truth of a higher truth as it comes into intelligence. And that's why intelligence is meant to be objective. When intelligence is tainted and biased and prejudiced by midas, by the kavim, like we said, that's not intelligence. Then intelligence has been taken hostage. That's called shechet. Like shechet ya'aver einei chachamim. Bribery, bias, blinds the eyes of the wise. Umisalav divrei tzadikim, and distorts the words divrei tzadikim, the words of tzadikim. The Rebbe always many times asked the question, why is then the Torah call them chachamim and tzaddikim? Torah Emes is calling the person a chacham because that's the power of bias. It's so powerful. It doesn't just distort the eyes of the fools, but even a wise person, if he's biased or she's biased, it'll get to your head. Like he explains in chapter 9, Tanya, just like the blood of the heart sustains the brain, rushes to the brain, the emotions of the heart can also go to the brain and affect it to the point you don't even think you're biased. It can change your way of thinking. That's why a person who's honest and truthful has to recuse themselves, or has to at least say, here are my, total transparency, full disclosure. Here are my biases. Here are my interests. So true intelligence is meant to reflect emes, not just a smart guy. You could have smart people who distort the truth, and actually the smarter they are, the more they can distort. They know how to cover their tracks. They know how to come up with creative schemes. And we see that. The most brilliant people could be the most destructive people because of that. They can manipulate well. So emes, however, is a whole different thing. Emes, as we're going to learn, is also connected to bittul. Not about you. It's not about your ego. So it's l'mayla mekavim, l'mayla higher than all of that, as we've been learning. So there's a parenthesis, and they say below that the parentheses maybe should begin before the words v'zeu shemidas emes, maybe it's all inside of a parenthesis. Definitely the end of the parenthesis right here, emes. And I was going to explain this further, but before I continue, any questions or anything you wanted me to clarify here? So he says like this now. The koyach ma, the chochma. Remember, chochma is made up of two words. Koyach ma, the power of ma. Ma has many meanings. Ma initially means bittul. And we talked about ma ban. Ma is bittul. Say ma, mazeh. What is this? What? Or you say v'nochnu ma, Moshe Rabbeinu, who actually has the letters ma within his name as well. Mem shin hey, ma. So koyach ma is the power of ma. So it says in places that chochma consists of two things. One is the ma, the wonder. Like when you say ma, what was that? Where did that come from? Like a sense of awe of a higher truth. And koyach is how it comes into a faculty. It says the koyach ma, the chochma, he bechinas nakuda. It's a nakuda. Like ma, it's just a point. Doesn't have any expansion yet. Like a yud. She nakudas ha'emes. K'moy shehi be'etzem ha'dover. It's the nakudas ha'emes. It's the kernel of truth. Or the spark of truth, the point of truth, which is the way it is be'etzem ha'dover. And you cut, when someone says, give me the kernel, give it to me in a nutshell, so to speak. So you're saying, what's the nakudas ha'emes in this point? Now someone reads a book, or an essay, or a business plan. Give me a one word or one letter. What's in the Nekudas Emes? She be'etzem hadover upnimi yusei, and its inner personality. The tamtsis, and it's tamtsis, like a summary, a concise, concentrated point. Umufcher hadover. He uses here 4 words, 5 actually. Etzem hadover upnimi yusei, betamtsis umufcher hadover. The etzem hadover, the very core of it. Primiuse, its inner dimension. Tamsis, like a concentrated summary. Umufcher hadover, the best of it. What's say mufcher? The most precious part. Mufcher is more than that. Mufcher is like the
choice.
Maybe the choicest. But he doesn't mean so much in rejecting. He means like, in other words, what's the punchline, so to speak. That's really tamsis. I'm not sure why he uses all these expressions. I'm sure each one has another point, but I think the point is clear what chochma is and what emes is. Then he goes on. L'chein Omar b'zeyar. That's why the Zayar says an interesting expression. The b'chochma dafka, and it's missing a word here, is beriru. So the Zayar says b'chochma is beriru. Is beriru is from the word birur. That dafka chochma clarifies. It creates birur. Birur, as we know, means clarifies, separates. When you mevader something, you're separating like the ikar from the tuffle. What's primary? What's secondary? What's the fruit? What's the dross? What is the shell? That's what birur is. Clarifying, separating. ultimately refining. All those words are appropriate to say in the word birur. Dafka chochma. Why chochma? Lefisha kol dover atzorich birur. Because everything that needs clarification, bein tevera, between what is good and what is bad, shema'urav, that is mixed together, sheker ve'emes, falsity and truth, it's all mixed together like a snowball. So you need to be mevarer. How do you clarify? How do you, in any case where you have something, someone tells you something, how do you know it's true? What part of it is true? Especially if there's a disagreement. There's a case, a court case, a din Torah. So how do you clarify? He says, "Ein birur zeh ela b'chachma dafka." That's what the Zohar is saying. This clarification is only through chachma. You must have chachma to create this type of clarity. Lefishu barer be'etzem. Same words he used all the way in the top, because it's barer be'etzem, because that's what chachma is. It's absolute, the personification you want, the manifestation of clarity. Al kein yesh bekeach levara kol taruvas tevara. If it itself is not clear, chachma, it's not going to give you that total clarity. But that's why it has the power, next page, to clarify all the things of a mixture, these composites or mixtures of good and bad. To separate between them, you need chochma. V'hu b'chinas ha'emes de chochma. This is the level of emes and chochma, like we said. Shebekechi levarer kol taruvas tevara. It has the power to clarify all these mixes, where things are mixed up, where things are confused, or things are all combobulated, or whatever the word you want to use. Uke Yaakov, going back to Yaakov, who was midas emes, shehoye ish tom ve'emes, hoye mevarer l'ramoyes delovan. Like we see by Yaakov, he was that innocent, he was that pure and truthful person. He was mevarer, he clarified, and he was able to refine, if you wish, the ramoyes, the deception of Lavan. Lavan, of course, was a master deceiver, deceiving in every possible way. He was a charlatan. He deceived Yaakov when he marrying Rachel and Leah, and deceived with all the different conditions he made. He was a crook, essentially, a swindler, whatever the word you want to use for it. But charlatan is a good word. Ramoyes, the Lavan, that's the word that's used, Ramoyes. So Yaakov is able to handle that because Yaakov was Ishtam. He was the antithesis, or the alter ego, if you wish, to Lavan. Okay. So that is the end of this paragraph. Now, any questions? So now he's going to talk about, so where is this birur happening? You say Chochma is the place, that's the Mavarer. Chochma is the one that clarifies. Chochma, you bring in a Chochem to clarify things. But where's this lack of clarity in the place that needs clarification? Obviously, higher than Atzilus, and Atzilus itself, especially Chochma Atzilus, there you have clarity. So now he's going to talk about where Chochma is the effect of Torah. Where is the action taking place, so to speak? So he says, Omnom. However, Mokamam is Barer. Where's the location, the place of where this clarification is taking place? This is not taking place in Chochma. This is Binah. Who Binah? So in the spheritic structure, Chochma is the Mevarer and Binah is the Mizbarer. That's the place where you need to clarify. He's going to explain why, obviously. But it's very interesting because it's like laying it out, as we learned earlier, the same concepts you can learn and speak in very practical language, or we can speak about it in the language of the spheres. Chochma Binah, we talked about Zoh and Malchus, for example, Mashpia Makabel. That Zoh is the quintessential Mashpia. Malchus is the quintessential Makabel. Talked about what Chesed and Gvura is, and Netzach, Hoid, and different things. So Chochma and Binah, he's now explaining as Mevarer and Mizbarer. Dehine Inyan HaBirur. So now, what does birur mean? What is this? He's dissecting what clarity means. Now, again, why am I reading this in detail and not just going over it quickly? Because this is very much the central theme of what we want to get to. How Torah helps us find clarity in a dark world, which in different words is the interface between divine existence. In different words, it's what we spoke about, the concept of the nefesh alikis ultimately mevarer the nefesh abamis, and in general, the neshama clarifying and separating and clarifying and refining the material world. So this is not just some detail. This is very much central to the overall theme that's going to help us get back to what the makabel is and hariya is. So he's explaining in detail what this process of birur is. I would even say, I have to go back to the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Mika Hashem Elokeinu. I even recall that we spoke about Torah, this element of birur. I want to look it up to see whether the ideas here are taken straight from there or they just overlap. It definitely later and earlier in the Hemshech of Ayin Beis is connected to that, but even this piece may also be. I'll look it up. Or if anybody looks up and sees some similar ideas, that Maimer definitely speaks about birur as well, of course. So he says, in ha-birur she is galus ha'emes. What is birur? Why do you need birur? Why do you need it in the first place? Because you need to reveal what's the truth. Without birur, you can't know what's true. Like I said, it can be one combobulated, is that the word? Or discombobulated? Whatever the word is. One confusing...
Combobulate means to synthesize, and discombobulated means like cultus.
Okay, good. So chaos, yeah. So you need his galus emes, and you need to reveal the emes. Ushiyeh emes nidav nigla gam le b'mokem emes atzmei. Very interesting how he literally breaks it down. So you want to reveal the truth, but you also want to reveal it in a place. Also, nidav nigla, it should be clear. Gam le b'mokem emes atzmei. In other words, if somebody is a truthful person, for example, you could be a truthful person. The question is, can you bring that truth to people who are not truthful? Like the case of Lavan and Yaakov. Now, Yaakov was ish emes, okay, but can he go into a dark world like Lavan in Charan? Charan, of course, Charein Avshal Mokem, a place where you have God's wrath, a hostile place, and bring truth there. A question we're all asking today. We spoke about it the other day. Can you talk to someone who's completely distorted or partially distorted about whatever, politics, about Israel, about whatever's going on in the world today, and can you bring emes to them? So it's one thing to have emes, to reveal emes. Also in a place that's not the mokem emes. In other words, you're going outside of the domain of the world of truth. Can you bring that truth into a false world, so to speak? And when you do that, it achieves something tremendous. When you do that, the emes resonates, becomes ratified. Because if a person is a truthful person, okay. But if you can bring truth and reveal it also in a place, in a place that was not in the very place of the truthful place. Like in the Beis Hamikdash, everything is true. But can you bring the truth of Torah or Beis Hamikdash outside of the world of Torah? Then the Mesames HaEmes, the emes gets ratified, confirmed, affirmed. And the thing that needs clarity is now clarified. So it's like, the way justice system should work. I'm not talking about how it actually works. That where you have an argument or you have a situation, you don't know if someone's guilty or innocent. And witnesses come to the case, testify, and you have evidence, and you have arguments here, there, circumstantial, not circumstantial, etc., etc. What are you really looking for? Birur emes. Again, I'm not talking about what the justice system is, what it's supposed to be. You're looking birur. That's what Chochma should. That's what Chochma does. That's what should be done. He's coming to explain why the Mokem HaMizbar is Binah, and we'll soon see why it's called Binah. But what is the purpose of birur? Birur is to reveal the truth and to reveal it in a place, even a place where it's not a place of truth. And through that, you ratify, you confirm, you affirm the truth, and you clarify that which needs clarity. And this clarification, where's the location of it in the sporadic structure? That's Binah. So before, he's going to explain it, but let me just say this just to make sure it's clear. Because when you talk about Chochma and Binah, Chochma is a nekuda of emes, but it's not developed. Binah would be if I come to you and I bring a whole business plan or a whole elaborated theory, and I present it to you in detail and so on. That's Binah, comprehension, fleshed out. And you, let's say you're the Chacham, and you look at it and say, well, here you start punching holes in it in a good way. I mean, constructive critique. What are you doing? You're going through this whole elaborate presentation, and you're pointing out things that are either not clear, or things that are wrong, or contradictions, or not properly presented, things that have to still be reviewed. So essentially, Binah is the place that needs birur. Chochma is the one that's mevarer, as we're going to learn. But Binah is the place where things are, that's the location where Seichel is really, that's called the laboratory. That's the laboratory where the ideas are being developed. And that's where you'll need birur. I'm talking again, Balbatish on a practical level. It also is in Ruchnius, in the Tzilis, that's the role of Binah and Chochma. Chochma is the one that provides the Nekudas Emes. Binah is the one that fleshes it out, but Chochma is the one that also clarifies if Binah got it right. Like when someone says, okay, let me elaborate on what you said, or I'll put it on paper, and you give it back to the original, the conceiver of the idea, the Chacham, and he says, well, you got this right, you got that right, but this is wrong. You know, like basically it's the process of clarification is, as he's going to explain in Binah. I just wanted to explain it because he doesn't explain yet why it's Binah, just to give a little, some oases, some words to wrap our heads around. But now he's going to explain it in more detail. So he says like this. Anybody wants to ask anything? Let me stop for a moment here. Okay, I just want to see for a moment. Where he's going, how far he's going with this. 1 second. Yeah. So just to give one more point, this is going to go for another on 2 pages. Then Va'adugma Mekola now, he's going to bring us back to Teirah Shebiksav and Teirah Shebal Peh, and he's going to say that Teirah Shebiksav is Chochma, Teirah Shebal Peh is Binah, if I recall correctly. Yeah, I think that's what he's going to say. Okay.
Rabbi Jacobson, I have a question, and it may not even be I know it's not a topic of discussion or not, maybe, but you know how we're talking about the whole concept of the candle and 2 different variations of it. Is there anywhere mentioned that we could also kind of parallel the idea with what we're discussing here, meaning the mikra would be the wax, the mishnah would be the wick, and then the Talmud would be the fire that would come out of it? Is there anything mentioned anywhere that you have come across?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Because we always talk about Chochma, you know, Torah being Chochma, that would be the course, you know, the wax, and then the Mishnah being the inner face as if it was. And then
what do you mean by wax? Wax, you mean like oil, shemen?
Oil, shemen, yes.
Here he says shemen is the nefesh abamis.
I know that. I'm
world.
saying, but can we parallel that idea? I understand that.
It's not consistent with this.
Seen it
this
anywhere, is what I'm saying.
I'm saying it's not consistent with this mimer. Maybe other mimerim may talk about it, but this mimer shemen here is generally animal soul or the physical world. The wick is the nefesh alikis or the mitzvah, and the oir is the oir of Torah, the light, the flame. I don't see any connection.
Okay.
We used to say that oil is everything in the world have oil. Chochma parallel oil that everything, even the stone, has, and this is might George thinking about. We have
but you still have
everywhere.
a wick and a flame to contend with, so it's not just about the oil. I mean, the point of Chochma, if you want about Chochma, he's going to get back to it when he gets back to talk about the oil you just talked about, is later on page, I think, 14. Yeah, he gets back to 1463. He's going to talk about the oil and Chochma, but it's not really, I don't think it's connected, right? We'll see later if it connects. I don't think so. Because it's the Chochma of the Nefesh Abamis, if I recall correctly, that's what the Maimon says, Chochma of Nefesh Abamis, Shemet. Okay. So let's continue on. Any other questions? Okay, so now he's going to explain. We find in places that Binah is called Chosem Emes, the seal of truth, which is another level than truth. Truth is the Emes. When you seal something, when you, let's say, someone signs or the king makes a seal at the bottom of the document that he wrote, so seal is a confirmation. So he's going to explain why Binah is called Chosem Emes. V'zeu shebinah nikra Chosem Emes. U'k'may pesachta lo pesuchei chesem. Yedua shekoyel al Binah. Binah is called the seal of truth. Pesachta lo pesuchei chesem. That's he's referring to, what's the expression there refers to? Pesuchei chesem, referring to the seals. And that, he says, goes on the level of Binah. She beginners pesuchei chesem. Maybe you can find it and post it, Yitzchak. The original expression, pesachta lo pesuchei chesem.
Yeah, it has to do with the looks like the vestments that the Kohen Gadol wore. Vasisa tzitz zahav Torah ufisachta alav pituchei chosem kodesh Lashem.
Right. Well, how do they translate pesuchei chesem there?
Probably it's
Yeah.
Basically, and it's sealed just like you're saying. It's on which you seal the inscription Kodesh Lashem.
Right. Okay, I just want to know how they translate it in the Pasuk in the Chumash. That's all.
Yeah.
The seals, Pesuchei Chesem. What's Pesuchei? The seals of. Okay.
I think it's like what do you call? Whatever. Keep going. I'm not finding the right word either.
Okay, when you find it, you find it. It's all right. It's good. It's all right. So that's called the level of Binah. She begins Pesuchei Chedain Tzirufe Eisius HaMachshava. Pesuchei Chesem Tzirufe Eisius means the combinations of letters, of the letters of thought. Doesn't go into detail here. That's the seal of truth. Like we say, the seal of God is truth. Seal. Basically, Binah confirms or verifies and validates or the truth of Chochma. So Chochma is truth. But in Binah is the place when you can bring that truth, reveal it, and reveal it in a place that was initially unclear. You brought clarity to a place of lack of clarity. That's the seal of truth. That's essentially what he's saying. But Inyan who? What's the Inyan in this? The Nakuda, the Chochma, she emes, ein emes niglo musik. The Nakuda of Chochma, which is truth, the kernel of truth, this truth is not necessarily revealed and comprehended. It's a truth within the world of truth, but we need that truth revealed. That even though the inyan is clear on its own, in its own world, so to speak, its own domain, in Yiddish he says, that the idea is true, the way it is in the Amiti Shel Davar. It's really aligned with absolute truth. So we don't know whether it's, you have to establish that it's true. So let's say I mentioned the case, I mentioned a court case. Somebody makes a statement and others challenge it, or not necessarily challenge it. You don't know for sure, it's not been verified. So even though it's true, well, we don't know that yet. Ain't a but of a nigla. It could be true, it could be not true. So you need to have that verification that clarifies it. The Inyan ba'atzmei, the Inyan itself is in a revealed way clear, shukach v'kach. So within its own world, like for example, if I said something I know is true, but you have not verified it, I know it's true for me. But aval she'emes ukach zeh aval she'emes ukach zeh ein nigla ve'ein mukhrach. So for me, for the person who's in that world of truth, it's clear. But that the emes is true is not necessarily revealed, and not definitely and not for sure true. That needs to be verified. That's called verification. The chacham atzmei, the person who conceived of the idea, and he's a true chacham. He sees the truth, and he sees why it's compelling. How it's compelling to say so, not just compelling. By him, it's a definite. But someone who's not a chacham like him, this emes is not necessarily revealed. So how do you reveal it? This requires a process. This requires the delving into, the immersion of Binah. So for you to verify, for you to say, I want to know what this Chacham said, I want to make sure it's true, this is going to need to go into a state of Binah. Binah is going to take it apart and ask questions and probe and look for different evidence to confirm and not confirm. That's the process of Binah. Now you can see right here, if you think about it, what we spoke about before, Mishnah and Talmud sounds very similar. Mishnah is a clarity that the Tanoim had, but only they had. The Amoraim did not have that clarity. So that's why they have to have Pilpul. Pilpul is Binah. He didn't say this explicitly, so I don't want to jump the gun, but I just wanted to give that context. So bottom line is, Binah is the process of finding the verification, clarifying it. With the kashe Ayin Beis ba'avonos v'asogas ha'inyan. When a person will immerse themselves in depth, in the intelligence and the comprehension and the understanding and comprehension of the idea, le'avinei heitev b'sichlei, to understand it well with his mind, oz yizgala emes. Then that truth that was there in the world of Chochma, and the Chacham, the first Chacham, yizgala emes shel hanakudas ha'askola, be revealed the truth, and ve'ech shemuchrach ha'inyan kach. The truth, and also that you must say, the definitiveness, the certainty, that you have to say this is the way it is. That certainty and that clarity is not there until, in the case of the person who doesn't have it yet, that clarity is not there until you have this clarification and verification. I mean, this is common practice, where somebody, let's say, presents to you a business plan, and they want to sell you their business, or they want you to invest in their business, and they give you all the documentation. So you give it to your experts and say, go through it, go through the numbers, go through their assumptions, verify, is it accurate, is it not accurate, what's correct, what's not correct. You're essentially verifying. Now, you may discover it's not true. You may discover some parts are, some parts are not. You may want more information. This is the common practice of verifying something for its truth and for its validity, and it's there's a word I want to use, not certainty. It's that it's like when you verify something, you say it's absolutely right. There's a certain word for it, not verification. Forgot the word. Okay.
Confirm.
What?
Confirmed or authentic?
Yeah, all those are correct words.
Valid?
Validity, validation. I said validation. Like, not only that, when you give somebody a stamp of approval, like a chesed emes, a seal of truth.
To ratify.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the process of Binah. The Gama Yidezeh, and another thing that happens through this birur of Binah, Mizbar Re'im Makol Sigub Selis. Like I just mentioned, an example I gave, the plan or the prospectus, if you wish, could be very good, but it could have some stuff in it that is questionable or problematic. So another thing that this we'll call due diligence does is that you are also clarifying kol sigub selis of every sediment and waste, anything that's like problematic. It's also clarifying that. Like, in other words, when you're looking at the idea, you could say, okay, but now there are some parts of it that really should be discarded. Umakol taz v'sheker, and from any mistake and falsity, sheyochel lipul bezeh, that was capable of entering or falling into this whole equation. So the birur, besides verifying and coming to a certainty of that this is correct, this is true, it also eliminates all elements that are problematic, questionable, mistakes, falsities, etc. And he explains why. Because the Hinei Nekudas HaChochma, so he's going now further, explaining how Binah actually adds something to the whole equation. Till now we were talking about that Chochma is mevarer within Binah, I mentioned. Here he's talking about how Binah is the place that is the Mokim HaMizbarer, that's the place where you clarify and you discover the truth. So he says, the Hinei Nekudas HaChochma, the point, the kernel of Chochma, the spark of Chochma, being it's only a point and it's not fleshed out, so if you heard your teacher say in one word or one headline an idea, concentrated, and he didn't explain it, what could happen next? It can go in many directions. Two different students can say this is what he meant or that's what he meant, because it's all a nakuda. I'm not talking about the chacham who said it. He knows what he meant. But but when you start trying to develop it or flesh it out, it could go la teisel chotzad. Hagam shenakuda hu barer be'etzem inyan canal, even though the nakuda is clear, the etzem inyan in the nakuda, in the world of the nakuda, hinezeu misha yochel lekablas nakuda. That's only someone who's able to understand and appreciate and receive that nakuda and know what the intention is. And to know and to recognize and discern that spark of truth. But someone that's not a keli, and he only receives the outer dimension of this point, he can come to make a mistake and even to a false conclusion. I remember there were times that the Rebbe wrote sometimes very, very briefly something, or he said something. So those of us that were more experts in the Rebbe's approach were able to understand it. Others looked at it and say, where did you get this from? How did you flesh this out in a way that's accurate? Because they didn't have the experience. So Nakuda has the potential for someone who doesn't know how to see it, either no experience or they don't have the wisdom or they don't have that knowledge, that it could be distorted. Okay, I just want to see here. Now he's going to go through a parentheses.
Parenthetical is pretty interesting.
I'm sure. I'm not thinking of skipping. I'm just thinking whether I should go into it in this class or it's going to require more time. That's what I'm considering right now.
Yeah, it's 10:32. This is some pretty powerful stuff in the parentheses.
Yeah, I'd prefer to take it patiently and stop here. I also have a flight a little later.
I have a
I'm
question,
back.
if I may.
Yeah, I'll take questions. I think I'm going to stop here. We have enough to digest, and I'm not running anywhere. We can always continue tomorrow. I do want to say one thing. I want to correct, I think, myself a bit. Before, when I explained Binah, and I was saying Mokamam is Batters, is Binah, so I explained it because Binah can be confusing because there's many details, and you need Chochma to clarify it. I think he says it later, that point, but right now, the way this is developing, it sounds like the other way around. Not that what I said was wrong, I don't think it's what he's emphasizing here. What he's emphasizing here, Mokamam is Batter, means Chochma is true in its own domain. The place where the clarification that's needed is the world of Binah. Because Binah, that's what Binah does. Binah is the verifier. Binah is the one that develops, that does the due diligence, as I said. And that's where you need. Obviously, you're going to need to reveal Chochma within Binah, but Binah is the place where you are, where you don't, like he said, it's an area, an entity that doesn't yet have the clarity and needs to find that clarity. And then when it does, it, so to speak, verifies the clarity also of Chochma. Because the Chochma's emes of Chochma is coming into Binah. And I'm not saying anything dramatically different than what I said before. I'm just correcting some of the context that I provided earlier. So it doesn't change the actual Havana, but just in case I misspoke, I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, let's stop here. Questions, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to first of all, Yuval. I don't know, Yuval, you have your hand raised. I don't know if you're saying you agree we should stop here, or if you have a question. Maybe you just accidentally clicked the. Anyways, that's how you raise your hand in Zoom. Okay. So I have a question. It's more. It's exactly what we're talking about, but it's more philosophical. So Torah's emes. So Torah is truth, and the way that reality and the world is explained to the Yid is a little different than the way it's explained to the Goyim. So, for example, what's kosher, what we're allowed to eat, what we're not allowed to eat, what's treif. Like something that's treif for us is okay to a Goy. So for us, it's treif because presumably, like it clogs up the arteries of ruchnius inside of it. Sorry, just a weird metaphor, but for a Goy, apparently it doesn't have any effect on the ruchnius. So how do we, as Yidden, when we're talking about affairs in the world, whether it's a Jewish affair or even a non-Jewish affair, like the war in Israel, for example, who's right, who's wrong? And, we like to believe we see right and wrong very clearly. We don't need to go into good versus evil here. But you say you're talking to the enemy, and they say, well, that's your truth. My truth is the opposite. You're the terrorist. You're the invader. You're the you're the occupier. Blah blah blah. I just picked that as one of a million examples. So how does one, coming from a Torah perspective, talk to whether it's another Jew or a Goy? I can talking to my less observant Jewish friend who has different politics than I did. I don't mean to go into politics specifically. You could pick any matter except maybe science. And you have these differing views, and you come to the table. You say, well, "Look, here's how I see it." You're coming from a Torah perspective. Let's say it's very well rooted in sources, even. And then people just say, I good for you. I don't see it. So how do you take a Torah perspective, particularly on a universal level, and persuade, let's say, a Goy that, look, here's good and bad, here's right and wrong, here's the.
Okay, I got the question. So very understood. I understand. Well, first of all, it's conflating a few things here. The Torah's truth, as I mentioned yesterday, harmony within diversity. You don't have to go to Goyim, you can go to Jews. There are laws in the Torah that apply to a Kohen, for example, laws around Truma, the eating of Truma, or the laws around the time of the Beis Hamikdash that doesn't apply today physically. The Torah, when you say truth, does not mean that it's relevant to everybody in the same way. There are laws applying to children, to women, to men, the laws of Pesach that don't apply to Shavuos. So the truth of Torah is one that permeates and affects every aspect of life and every type of person. There are people, for example, that are Teirasa Menaseh. That their business is learning Torah all day. Other people are Balei Esek, like Yisachar and Zvulun. So the Torah's emes applies to everyone, and the emes is relevant to each person according to where they are. Like Chanech L'Nar Pidarka, like educating different children based on their strengths and their weaknesses and their particular personality type. That's one thing. Let's just start with that. As far as when there's confusion and there's two different opinions, so the same thing I would apply to a din Torah or a court of law, I would apply to the same arguments about the narratives around the Jews of Israel and the Palestinians. Iran has a very clear narrative in their mind, as does others. Everybody has their narrative. So if you are a truthful person and you're a Martian coming from Mars, and you just want to get clarity, so what I would say is the Torah's approach is as follows. Listen to everybody, talk to everyone, hear what they have to say, let them produce their evidence and their arguments without any censorship, and then do your due diligence. Without any biases and prejudices, you may come back and say, I found clarity. You may come back and say, I found partial clarity. Or you may come back and find out that I'm just as confused as ever. So the process of finding emes is equal, whether it's in our own personal lives or it's communal lives. Now, unfortunately, the Nazis also had a narrative. They had a narrative. And some of them, I'm sure, were convinced that they were true. They maybe some knew it was a false narrative and they didn't care. They were cynical. But let's say so those that were naive enough in it. So again, as repulsive as it is to me and to us all and obscene, but if you really want to apply the Kudus Emes, what you do is you have to look at everything and come away and say, okay, what is the truth that I can find? That's why the Jewish people always relied on a Torah. Because without a Torah, you're up to the subjective whims of the monarch or the church leader or the king or the whoever is in control. Now, you could ask the question, what about in Judaism? I have this topic that I speak about, who gave the rabbis all their power? How do we know that the Jewish people and their leaders didn't distort things? Fine, I have no problem with that question. But there is a process of finding truth. Now, the scientists like to say they know the process. But we find that they have forged evidence. They also have biases. People have special interests. They can make money and fame and other prejudices that can affect their thinking. So I think an intelligent person, especially armed with knowledge, and most importantly, which is maybe the biggest thing of all, honesty and integrity. If you don't have that, if Moshe did not have honesty and integrity, it doesn't matter how smart he is. If you have that, and armed with the tools that Torah Chassidus provides us, I think you can pretty much find clarity in most situations. I deal with this all the time. A couple comes to me, the husband has one story, the wife has another story, and as usual, there's the third story that's neither of them. So you have to try to figure out who's saying, what are they saying? Is it malicious? Not always. They have their own distorted views. That doesn't mean they're intentional. So it's all the process of birur. How do you figure out what to do? Now, I try to, of course, be non-biased and non-prejudiced, even though there are times you hear things that do emotionally shake you up. Someone accuses someone of something, but you have to stay impartial, and you try to find that clarity. Now, do I always succeed? I try. I think I succeed a lot of times. Sometimes I succeed to the point that I got to the clarity that they'll never listen to me. That they're two people who are just locked in their view, and no matter what I'll say, it won't make a difference. That's also clarity for me. And I'll tell it to them. I'll say, you know what? I don't think you're really open to hearing an opinion that's not agreeable to you. So then they make a decision if I want to use my time in this case, whether it's going to help or maybe I can use my time in better ways. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. My point is that there are people that I have spoken to that I feel at some point they're not looking for the truth. Now, they could accuse me of the same. I understand that. We're all human beings. But that's why you need to get back to honesty and integrity. There are people you trust and people you don't trust. Now, I would never say trust anybody absolutely. Verify. That's the whole process that we're talking about. Verify and confirm. Look, if the Amoraim were just going to rely on Kabbalah, on Divrei Kabbalah, they would they wouldn't do pilpul. Look how much they argue. This one says this, and the other one says, no, it's not that way. And this one says this, and that, and that. To me, that's a demonstration of people seeking truth, because they're going to probe, even though it may be uncomfortable, it's even confrontational. Their intentions are pure. Now, but we all know there are people who argue and argue and argue, and there's no pure intentions at all. They just like to argue, or they have a preconceived notion. There's no one to talk to. So if you're talking about people that I think have a semi form of intelligence and some objectivity and are ready to talk, you could probably get places. But there are a lot of, as you can imagine, there's a lot of qualifications here. So I don't have a better way to really continue. But this is the process. If we was easy, we'd have Mashiach here already. Just bring Torah Semes, bring everybody together at one table. Everybody, Putin, the Khomeini, whatever his name is, the head of Iran, the head of the Hamas, Sinwar, Netanyahu, sit down, Torah Semes, and find the emes. We all understand how laughable that is. Laughable, how tragic that is, I should say. Because we don't live in a world of emes. And there's all kinds of biases. You know, to me, I always go back to why do they hate Israel so much? Why does Iran want to wipe off Israel? So now they'll say because Israel in 1948 displaced the Palestinians, but that wasn't the first time that they called for Jewish genocide in 1948. So you see, you're getting into issues that a lot of people won't admit. They won't say that. They'll always say the Jews are the ones that did it. Now, I'm of course biased because I am Jewish and so on, but I'm just showing you the direction of the approach.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's all I can say. What can I say?
That's a beautiful application of the Chassidus we just learned. So then, follow-up question. Hey, this is Olam Sheker, right? And, you know, because Elikus is, the darkness is kafel mechupel. So how does one live sanely, other than in one's own world, Torah world? I guess that's the only way to look at it. In an Olam Sheker, like it's not going to change from an Olam Sheker to an Olam Emes until Mashiach. Seems to me that's the whole point of Mashiach.
Let me respond to that. I don't have a lot of time because I have to go somewhere soon. I'm traveling. But let me say this. I learned from the best. I have a Rebbe, who was to me a man of emes, a man of truth. He had a Rebbe, and he had a Rebbe. The Jewish people have been struggling with this question for 4,000 years, starting with Avram Avinu. And interestingly, Avram did not isolate himself and say, you know what? I found the truth of God. Now I'll live quietly with my wife, Sarah, in some wilderness. We'll graze the sheep. We'll tend to the sheep, and I'll meditate about God. No. He went back into the Olam HaSheker with threat to his life, put himself in danger, and he kept on teaching and teaching. And 4,000 years later, more than half the world embraces Abraham as the pioneer of virtue and justice and charity. The answer is, our truth is not just a truth for ourselves, like he says here, it's a truth, we want to bring it to the Mokim HaMizbarer, to a place what's not true. Now you have to choose your battles. This does not mean that you have to go into every dark place on earth, especially places that are very dangerous. You have to choose your battles. I find in my life, this is my mission. I could have easily just sat and taught Ayin Beis all day. I enjoy doing this. Could have given classes. But I went and I decided to go ahead and teach online and reach as many people, millions or whatever amount I can reach with the emes of Torah. Some people hear it. Some people it's a seed that's planted and maybe one day it sprouts. Some people it takes time. And I'm not claiming I have a monopoly. I'm not teaching my own ideas. I'm teaching things that I believe are truths that are passed on, timeless truths from the beginning of time and beyond. And I feel I've had influence. Have I had the proper? No, it did not affect the critical mass. The world is still plenty of sheker. I've not changed the media or the politics and so on. So I'm not naive thinking, but we believe that we do it slowly and there's a butterfly effect, there's a cumulative effect, and we ultimately have changed the world. It took time. And I learned a lot from Avram Avinu because he was a single man with a single wife, and they did teach a formula, a method that has ultimately changed the world. And I look at the Rebbe after the Holocaust, I look at all the Rebbes in the darkest of times. Not only did they not give up for themselves, they continued to be on the offense, never on the defense, on the offense. And you just forge ahead. That's our mission. This is a battle that God has given us, and we know that God is with us. And there's no such thing as impossible. There's no such thing as giving up, period. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And
You said
Mashiach
you're
will come. The MS
Yeah.
will prevail. MS me'eretz titzmach.
Mhm.
You know, it's an interesting medrash. I'll conclude with this. The medrash says that when God created the world, he spoke to two midas, two of his attributes. One midas ha'emes and one midas ha'chesed. And he asked midas ha'emes, should I create the world? And emes said, no. It said, olam mole shkarim. It's a world filled with lies. Why would you create the world of lies? Emes, of course, is representing truth. Why would he want to? So Hashem listened and said, and Chesed, what do you say? Chesed said, Olam molech sadim. It's a world that will be filled with kindness. People will do a lot of kindness. So create the world. The Medrash continues, Hashem took Emes, he threw it to the ground, and he created the world, Olam b'chesed yivana. Olam chesed, he built it with chesed. Because if you build it with Emes, there's no way a world like this could exist if Emes was in control. So what does it mean he threw it to the ground? So it says, because Emes me'eretz titzmach. He didn't throw it to the ground like discard it. He planted into earth that ultimately it will be embedded in the earth. And in time, Emes me'eretz titzmach, it will ultimately sprout. But it will take time. But first chesed, like think of chesed as the raindrops. Let's provide kindness, bestow empathy and benevolence, and ultimately human beings will emerge. The world will, its deeper divine truths will ultimately emerge. I think it's a beautiful way of visioning the whole picture. And that doesn't mean there isn't sheker. There's plenty of sheker. We all know that. A little more chassidus applied to what we're learning now. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. Beautiful. You said you're traveling tomorrow. Is there today? Is there
No.
tomorrow?
It's only today. I'm going to Detroit just for the day. I'm back tonight. I'm just going for a few hours. I have to go for some event.
Okay.
Okay. No. Everything is regular schedule. No change. Next week is Tisha B'Av, of course. The week after, I'll let you know. Right now, let me first of all end I didn't even stop the recording, but let's stop the recording. Always good to have all this. We're middle of page 1375.